Welcome. My name is Dr. Suzanne Bagnera, and I am joined today with my friends Steve and Andy as we look to the future of clean. Just a little bit of background. We will get started with a small amount of information about ourselves, and then we have some questions that I will ask our panelists. And we welcome any questions to come through the chat to be asked directly of our panelists today. Again, my name is Suzanne Bagnera, and I work at Boston University in the School of Hospitality Administration as a clinical assistant professor. In addition, I serve as the managing partner and co-founder for the Hospitality Leadership Academy, whereby we offer customized training and customer service experiences to develop teams and leaders to be more successful. And my other day job is to be the producer of the No Vacancy News live podcast Monday through Thursday with Glenn Hausman and Anthony Malchieri. In my prior life before academics, I served as a general manager primarily with the Intercontinental Hotel groups of hotels with Holiday Inn Express, Holiday Inn, Staybridge Suites. I've got over 20 years of working in the hospitality industry, and now my mission is to really work on bridging the gap between academia and the industry. And my background from education comes from Iowa State University. We are joined from the Global Biorisk Advisory Council with Steve Earhart. He serves as the Director of Technical Operations, a division of ISSA, the International Sanitary Supply Association. He has over a decade of experience in biosafety, biorisk management, and general health and safety, serving as this director for this last year of the GBAC STAR facility and service provider for an accreditation program. So thank you for being with us, Steve.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Andy Cooper is the Senior Vice President of both Research and Development for the Global Institutional Specialty Groups within Ecolab, serving a wide range of customers, including hotels, restaurants, long-term care facilities, schools, commercial buildings, and grocery markets. Andy joined Ecolab in 1998 and has been responsible for the diverse innovation and customer support teams across Ecolab's corporate technology, industrial healthcare, life sciences, and institutional groups. And he holds both a master's and a PhD in microbiology from the University of Illinois. So thank you for being with us, Andy.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
So certainly with the pandemic, I think the elevation of being clean has really come to the forefront. One of the ways that my research team had started to look at a study was Cleanliness Theater. And we did some research and had over 400 participants that took a look at the trust factors that related to cleanliness inside of hotels. And our results indicated that 76% of respondents felt more comfortable with branded hotels versus independent hotels or even with an Airbnb option. And so bringing this sense of cleanliness to the forefront, or what we might call center stage in Cleanliness Theater, has really changed and elevated being more covert, if you will, and doing cleanliness practices in front of the guest, being more open to the forefront and communicating that level of clean in advance, whether it be through an email or at a check-in or through the mobile app that people are utilizing. So from that vantage point, I would really love to hear from both of you as to what you anticipate being, what does the future of clean look like? Get started with you, Steve.
A couple different things to me. I think recognizing the value of the custodial service people is something that has been overlooked for a long time until this last year, and really labeling them as frontline workers and essential workers throughout this pandemic. So I think understanding and recognizing the value from the employer's perspective, and leading that into hopefully this era of professional development for custodial service workers. I think that is a space that hasn't really existed, and it's a field that turns over frequently. But I think the value that you see in helping keep people healthy within businesses, I think is going to be crucial moving forward in getting people that are committed to the work, that can stick around and really provide that value that we now see. Beyond that, as I think we'll talk about a lot today, is technology, products that are coming out of the market. I think through crisis, there's always the opportunists that come and try to make a dollar through a crisis, but also with that is a real need that is identified. So I think the technology relative to delivery systems, to air treatment, to validation of cleanliness, I think those are all things that are going to stick around and become more and more important as the data is continued to be collected.
Great, thank you. Andy, why don't you give us your take?
Sure. Yeah, I agree with what Steve described there as well. And I describe it as a program, right? So oftentimes clean has come down to a product or an activity. And I think what the pandemic has taught us is that to really be successful, you need to take a systematic approach to it. So we talk about, creating, checking, seeing, and believing clean. And so you mentioned cleaning theater, for example. I think making clean visible to the extent that it increases confidence, it's still scientifically legitimate and it's necessary. COVID really reinforced some of the things that we needed and we understood we needed to be doing all along in order to prevent seasonal illnesses, et cetera, that increase absenteeism, decrease customer user experience, increase the likelihood of foodborne illness outbreak, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think the systematic approach that recognizes the labor constraints that we have, so it seeks to make it simple, it seeks to make it trainable, and in a way that's then long lasting and sustainable is the key. And there isn't any single product, there isn't any single program that achieves that. And so it's a matter of working to make a complete approach that's scientifically certified or valid, that we can implement with confidence over time. And so that may sound complicated. Ultimately, it's all about making it easier. And when we make it easier for people to do, then the protocols themselves work and they have the desired outcomes we're all seeking. So that's a glimpse into the future, which is an acceleration of where we wanted to go for quite some time.
It's amazing how fast something like a pandemic can take us from A to Z, or maybe A to X, and we still got to get to Z pretty close, but we've advanced so far so quickly. So there are three terms that we hear a lot about between being clean, sanitized, and disinfected, and they each mean something different. So Andy, can you please clear up some of these term confusions that we really come across?
Certainly, yeah. I'll keep it relatively brief because it can get somewhat confusing, right? Because sanitizers can be regulated by the FDA, and we have hand sanitizers, food contact sanitizers, and then we have disinfectants. But to keep it relatively simple, right, cleaning is removing soil from a surface. And that's really essential because the truism, we call it that because it's generally true, you can't sanitize or disinfect a dirty surface. So cleaning is an essential feature, but it's not the same as killing. And then sanitizing and disinfecting are really two different levels. So sanitizing is generally reducing the bacterial population on a surface, and disinfecting really then gets to broader spectrum, higher intensity kill of bacterial pathogens, viral pathogens, and fungi. And so that's the difference between cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfecting. And generally in that progression, it's raising the bar of how many microorganisms you remove or kill from that surface. And in the context of COVID-19, we're coaching people to move more toward the disinfectant or even a hospital or healthcare grade disinfectant, not for all things, because again, for hands or for food contact surfaces, perhaps that calls for something different, but we want to move toward that disinfectant realm. And so it's important to be thoughtful around what we choose. The EPA, by the way, has a great link on what's the difference between cleaning, sanitizing, disinfection. So there's a good link to go there. We talk about the and list of EPA products that are approved for COVID-19, it's important to remember that all of those are disinfectants because only those disinfectants have the viral claims. Some products have multiple claims: cleaner, sanitizer, and disinfection. And generally, you want to look for something that has the combination of both cleaning and disinfection so that you can use a single product for what would otherwise be multiple steps. So it's all, again, about simplification.
Can I just take that a little step further? And I know for me, one of the things that kind of like makes my hairs tingle is when I see folks using a product that has what is considered a wet surface time and are not allowing it the time to remain on that surface to do its job. Could you help clear up the purpose behind that?
It's a great question. I could take that one and invite Steve's thoughts as well. But what I would say is, yeah, there's been this arms race, if you will, for shorter contact times. And that's useful to the extent that it aligns more toward how people actually use products, right? Because if a product requires an extraordinarily long contact time that simply isn't achieved because the surface doesn't stay wet or the chemistry doesn't stay on that surface long enough to be effective, you're absolutely right. That's a problem. Having said that, it's always a blend, right? And that there's only so fast that you can make a product. And so ultimately we need the practices that people implement to be used properly and to accommodate all the different ways that people actually use products. So it's important to be an informed consumer or customer around these so that products, whether they're wiped, they're sprayed, they're mopped, that indeed those label directions, it's the fine print, as we say, but that fine print is very important. And it's important to then partner with a provider who can help you implement that product correctly. And so that contact time, compatibility, rinsing or no rinse, you identify one feature of several that we need to consider.
Great, thank you. Anything to add to that, Steve?
Yeah, I think one of the things that the general public still struggles with even now is understanding how to read a label of a cleaner or a disinfectant. And that's a huge part of it. And to go back to the first question about what the future of clean looks like, I'm praying that the future of clean does not involve going to a restaurant and seeing the spray and wipe in a matter of 5 seconds and seating a new group of people. I just get the chills every time I see that because they're not allowing for, there's no disinfectant that has a 5-second dwell time on it. So I'm hopeful that education piece, that label reading piece, we can figure out a way to really get that communicated so we can use these products effectively and be smarter with our resources too.
Yeah, excellent point. And I think that brings us back to, this cleanliness theater that, you're a customer sitting in a restaurant and you're eating. I know I was out with my business partners last night, and of course I was observing how the turnover was occurring. And so in some instances, especially in hotels, we've made efforts in the past where we did all of our cleaning and it was behind the scenes. It was backstage. It was done at night. It was done while the guest was not in the room. So out of sight, out of mind mentality for our guests. But COVID has really changed that, where the guests want this sense of they want to see the cleaning happen in front of them. And so we've moved some of what those night tasks have been to occurring during the daytime. But moving forward, as business starts to resume in hotels, occupancy starts to drive back up, what aspects of what we might now consider cleanliness theater do you think are here to stay so that guests have this increased level of confidence in the location that they choose to stay in?
I'll jump in on that one. I think the first thing is continued visibility of cleaning and disinfecting of high touch points. I don't think we need to be out there cleaning the ceilings and 20 feet up the walls and show everyone that we're doing that. But it's the high touch point. It's the elevator buttons. It's the door handles. It's all the common spaces that we're in, including restaurants, if hotel spaces have that. To me, the continued visibility of high touch point, frequent cleaning and disinfecting should be here to stay. I think also the communication to the consumer is something that I look for now. If I do some travel with this work as well, and I'm looking for that communication from the hotel to say, here are the steps that we're taking to give you confidence that the room you're staying in is clean, the breakfast that you come to in the morning is clean and safe and healthy. So whether that is a seal on the door, or the communication of an app, a phone app to help to change the TV channel, just little things like that I think have streamlined and made things more efficient, but give the consumer that visual cue of confidence that allows them, especially people with families, where people want to start going on vacation again. We want to make sure that our kids stay safe and healthy. So really that communication and assurance that I can trust this facility that I'm going into should be here to stay.
Yeah, Steve is exactly right with regard to high touch surface areas. That's not controversial. It's been proven in healthcare many times, whether it's C. diff infections or others. That applies true in public health arenas, all the places we go, and as well with the visibility. What I'd add perhaps is simply that it's, surfaces have had a lot of attention for good reasons. It's a key component of environmental hygiene and infection prevention. What I would say is, going back to the programmatic aspect, I think, in fact, I know based on the research that I know you've seen and we've done as well, it's elevated customers and consumers' expectations across the board. So that also translates to safe food, safe water, safe air, safe surfaces, pest control, et cetera. And so to the extent that the heightened awareness of the public has been increased, it calls for a heightened level of clean, and safe across the board. And so we talk a lot about surfaces, absolutely essential component, but it's not the only. And that's where an entire program, if you will, really doesn't necessarily have to cost more, because we've demonstrated that the return on the investment is there in terms of driving customer confidence and traffic, and then improving employee retention and engagement. And so I think that it requires a more complete solution coming out of this than we might have envisioned going into it.
And we're going to add something to that, Steve?
Yeah, just one other thing. With the GBAC STAR facility accreditation program that we do, we focus a lot on scalable response, which is really taking our routine day-to-day cleaning activities with our high touch points, making that routine, but also if we have another pandemic or some unknown disease that requires isolation, requires communication with a health department, that those steps are in place now to be able to respond quickly and prevent things from spreading within a facility. So that scalable response, I think, is something that's here to stay. And from a documentation standpoint, I think people have taken a lot of steps over this last year to put those steps in place.
Great, thank you. And I would say that based on my research that I did, I think a lot of consumers are looking for that proactive communication about what those enhanced protocols are. They want to see that it's effective chemicals, techniques, technology, and it's being more overt as opposed to covert. And they're also looking to see that they have more direct verbal emails, communications, letters, as opposed to just, signage. I know for me, I feel like I go to a place and I look at a wall or, an entranceway and a door, and you've got all these different signs all over, and you're like, well, what does it mean? What do you have to follow? And so I think if you can be very poignant in what your visual cues are, your indicators, whether it be the stickers on the high touch areas or the notes that you've done something for that cleaning, I think that helps that consumer regain that level of trust and demonstrate that you're doing that. So Steve, you brought up a good point in terms of your STAR program. So what are the different types of certification programs that are available that will provide training, credentials, that will increase that consumer confidence in the cleanliness of hotels that hotel operators and employees can engage in?
So there's several kind of third-party programs similar to GBAC. but what we've also seen, and I think this is great, is especially in the hotel industry, is kind of corporate driven programs. And I've seen a lot. I've seen, I've worked a lot with Hyatt Group. Their entire portfolio of hotels have gone through GBAC Star. But every chain that I have looked at has developed their own program within, which I think is fantastic. But so what we're doing with GBAC and GBAC Star accreditation is providing a third party look at those processes and procedures, but also getting into more of a continuous improvement management system, compliance registers, as you know, we're waiting on the federal government to put out their emergency standard relative to infectious disease, probably specific to COVID, and helping people understand that all of these steps that are being taken may now be a compliance requirement. So helping people through that. I think auditing and inspecting and validating their cleanliness procedures is something that's really important, and it doesn't have to be complicated. But from an organizational and a documentation standpoint, I think this is an arena that has been lacking in that oversight. So that's kind of the gist of what our accreditation program really provides to a facility, is helping get organized and stay organized again through all different sorts of scenarios.
Great, thank you. Andy.
Yeah, the number of certification type programs is growing, it seems, monthly, and all with similar sort of intent. What I would say is similar to Steve's comments, is a big differentiator is the ability to then to not only check in the moment that a specific attribute of a healthy building or clean environment is met in principle, but that it's actually being done in practice. And so a key differentiator is indeed the audit, the close the loop capability to not only identify that a protocol is there in theory, but that it's actually being followed in practice. And so this annual renewal recertification, we approach it from an Ecolab Science certified program perspective to make sure that the multiple facets of that program are there, not just one, so it transcends application, and that there's a process for continuance and behavior modification. Because at the end of the day, this is extraordinarily people oriented, right? And we love that. We wouldn't want to take people out of the loop. They're an essential part of delivering the program. And so we need to make sure that with labor turnover, onboarding, and implementation, that indeed that program can be sustained. And it's not a checklist, checkbox, or checks in the mail sort of approach, that in fact, this is something, it's a commitment to clean, an elevated standard of clean that transcends time, departments, and applications. And that's really the way we've pursued it. And so I think that's the way to look for in the various programs that are evolving today.
Great. So the components that you alluded to is that we are indeed a people-driven aspect of clean. We don't necessarily take that away. So we are certainly facing an unprecedented labor shortage in terms of it being crisis level at the present moment. So how would you suggest for operators to be able to provide this enhanced level of cleaning services, yet they may not be able to do it with the same level of staff that they've had in the past?
For me, what I have seen and people that I have spoken to is utilizing some of this technology that has been introduced over the last year, whether that is from an audit and inspection standpoint, using phones and QR codes. We've seen QR codes used for everything now. I think that is one of the most useful things to really come to the mainstream throughout this last year. But then you get into things like something that can monitor your inventory, perhaps, or your resource level, the soap and paper towel level in the bathroom. Something where slowly but surely you can utilize your time more efficiently. So it's something as simple as constantly checking bathrooms for levels of product, something that you don't really have to do anymore because you get an alert that says so. So just from a resource consumption standpoint, really looking at having those good documented standard operating procedures. So you're not just spraying and wiping a table with expensive disinfectant that's not being used correctly, or if you're spraying the ceiling every 4 hours for some reason and you're wasting the product. So I think utilizing these technologies with apps, with QR codes, with consumption data that you do on your own, to try and make this resource consumption more efficient, I think that can then be translated to a labor efficiency as well.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct, right? None of us have the time, the interest, or the energy to do things that for show, right? This is all, it's got to have its purpose and its place in the program. And so being extraordinarily thoughtful and selective around what procedures we implement and how we do them is the starting point, right? And as much as I know everybody works on that, it's amazing how over time product solutions get added, the program diverges from the place where it started or what we intended. And so staying on top of that to keep it safe, simple, sustainable is really key. There is a digital component to it for sure. And so to the extent that we can automate routine tasks, as Steve alluded to, that's certainly part of our innovation trajectory. And that becomes lower cost, more pervasive every day around remote monitoring and support, et cetera. So there's quite a few innovation levers. Think about training as well, too. The way that training's delivered, nobody reads a manual anymore, right? And so the key part is we grew up in an era of wall charts, et cetera, that are easy to walk by but never actually read. And so the way that training can be delivered in a way that's thoughtful, extraordinarily efficient, and effective is another place of investment and a tremendous amount of innovation. So there's certainly ways to approach that labor constraint with empathy and efficiency that we've learned pretty quickly out of necessity over the last year.
I think too, with understanding and looking at the cleaning industry from a perspective of what it's really trying to accomplish in infectious disease prevention. If you look at it that way, I think that's a really humbling way to look at why we're cleaning and disinfecting. And it's a cause that no matter what company you work for, if you're competing, if you're, whatever the situation, it's all a very common goal that we can get behind. And I think we can utilize those communities a little bit better than maybe we have in the past. I mean, look at Ecolab. Ecolab is everywhere. Every hotel I go into has Ecolab plastered everywhere. Every restaurant I go into has Ecolab products. So we can share these best practices throughout these communities. ISSA has 10,000 corporate members in the cleaning industry. This is a huge community that we can utilize and communicate with to make sure we're all working towards the same goal.
Very true. Certainly products that we're always easily able to learn and know about and being there. And I think even as an operator, I always felt confident that from one property to another, I didn't have to worry or be concerned about what I was using and my team knowing how to use the products. So Steve, you brought up a great point about QR codes. Like I know a couple of years ago, nobody had the app on their phone. They didn't use them and it was real hesitant. They were used in other locations in other countries. But now it's becoming a little bit old hat now in this last year. It's great technology. So what are some of the other technological innovations that you see on the forefront, or maybe not get us from A to X as quickly as a year, but are going to drive us to that next point?
Well, there's been a flood of new products, at least on the market, that may or may not hold water. But I think I know of one whom I spoke to right before this with a robotic delivery system for disinfectants that uses electrostatic charge. So I think that's something that can twofold kind of be efficient with our resource consumption, help with the labor issues that may exist as well. Again, talking about our resource consumption, our audits and inspections, those technological tools, but I think the biggest one that we'll see the most progress and most communication on in the next year is air treatment, air purification, and validation of cleanliness. So I'll use this opportunity to talk a little bit more about a GBAC program that we're launching. Is just kind of a registered product and program and technology. Again, we have a huge network of our scientific advisory board that we take all of these products, and one of the things that we try to do for our GBAC Star accredited facilities and service providers is help them wade through some of the sea of new products and technology that's out there by really, again, providing a review and accreditation behind it. So we're beta testing that now with a few select companies, but I think looking for that proof of concept, even if it's not something that you look to GBAC to validate, but looking on the website, what are they telling you? What are they providing to you that gives you confidence in that efficacy? If they're not citing any sort of trials and tests and data that says it works and it's reputable and it's something you can either request or download those papers or those white papers, it's something where, as with everything, you really need to do a little bit of research on to make sure that you are you're not having the wool pulled over your eyes with some of these opportunists out there.
Yeah, Steve is exactly right. Wading through the sea of product options is, I think something that I've certainly seen as well too. I've been at this for over 20 years and never have I seen more options, more snake oil than I have in the last year, to be candid about it, right? And so many of them work as advertised, many of them will not ultimately. And so, yeah, looking for the science, certification, registration, and substance behind it is key. That's difficult to do without the resources. And so we have 1,500 scientists in Ecolab who do that as a living, right? And so that's one example of how we approach it. What I would say is, in the future of different technology solutions in clean, Steve touched on air. Certainly that is absolutely an axis or a lever for innovation that has come to the forefront. The good news is there's emerging framework, at least of science and regulations around that, whether it's filtration, et cetera, to help understand what works, what doesn't, what its efficacy is. If you look at the other sort of innovation opportunities, we talked about digital remote service and automation. There's certainly surface compatibility, program compatibility, because as these products are used more frequently, we need to make sure that as they're used with the new furnishings, floors, et cetera, in customer operations, that they allow those assets to keep their integrity and their good looks over time. So that's extraordinarily important, because we've seen issues with that emerge, over the last year. Sustainability is a key one, right? So looking at particularly, if we look at the waves that are coming, sustainability was a big one. It took a step back perhaps in the last year, but it's still there. It's certainly in our core objectives. So looking at the water, greenhouse gas, CO2 footprint, chemical footprint, plastics and packaging is for all of those operations. Those are all innovation opportunities as well. And they're not just from a green or tree hugging perspective, they're very practical, right? Because there's ways to implement programs that are not only sustainable from an environmental perspective, but then they're also easier and safer to use. So, there's innovation for many years to come, and the urgency is spinning around only implementing those that drive customer value, now, because again, this isn't a theoretical exercise. Whatever it is that's implemented needs to deliver the outcomes. Steve referenced that earlier. It's too easy to focus on the protocol of the product. What we're really looking for is the customer outcome. And so that's the lens that we look through all those innovations that we survey.
Great point. And especially that research. I know products like when we've talked about air, HEPA filters and UVC in terms of ultraviolet C light, hospital grade disinfectants, really looking to the medical field for what they have utilized. Is that something that's transparent to use in hospitality, or electrostatic sprayers? Are any of those additional options to consider? Is the jury out on those? Does it, with the electrostatic sprayer, and you talk about the furniture, are we creating more damage long-term than we are in the short term? Any thoughts on those different types of solutions?
One thing
I'll jump in with, sorry, go ahead, Steve.
Go ahead, Andy. Go ahead.
We're both polite here, and I'm sure we have some similar thoughts, or at least I'll assume so, right? And the electrostatic spray is technically legitimate. Now, it wasn't necessarily on EPA's radar because it needs to be approved for application through various devices. Those approvals have now come through for many products, but they're the key to look for, as Steve referenced earlier, to look at the label. Electrostatic spray works, so to speak, but again, only when used with the appropriate contact time, the appropriate chemistry. So it's a more efficient way to do large areas of disinfection that you would never want to do with the trigger sprayer, having to pull that trigger 1,000 times to disinfect a school, right? So to me, that's the place where electrostatic spray fits. And so its legitimacy depends upon, again, making sure that you have an appropriately registered product that can be used safely according to label directions, and then to find its place where it fits. And in that case, that's an efficiency play. And it's an important one, but it's not a panacea for ultimately wiping high touch surface areas, because spraying a cleaner on a surface doesn't necessarily remove the soil. And so again, it has to be incorporated thoughtfully into a program. Sorry, Steve, go ahead.
Nope, I think you nailed that. I was just going to say, I think that all of those different types of products that do hold water are always worth exploring. But as everyone knows, we have to consider cost, especially with the economic impacts of a pandemic, understanding where our resources are and where we can best utilize them. I know one example that I've seen is the UVC light disinfectant for escalator handrails. Does that technology work? Yes. When used appropriately, is it the most efficient application on an escalator handrail? I think that we've found that may not be true, depending on traffic of that escalator. So you can spend $200,000 on a retrofitting system for an escalator handrail, or maybe we can put hand sanitizer at the top and bottom of the escalator and clean with regular cleaner and disinfectant. And so trying to understand that utilization of resource before pulling the trigger on something out of a knee-jerk reaction, I think is really important. And I think everyone can appreciate keeping cost in mind with these things.
Great point. And really getting to those resources. So certainly I have found over the course of time during this pandemic, it seems like sustainability almost took a back seat because plastic bags in some locations had to return because you couldn't bring your own. We saw an increase of styrofoam or plastic for takeout containers. Even obtaining those takeout containers for restaurateurs became nearly impossible because of this increased demand. Even in a hotel room, eliminating or maybe stopping using the devices in the rooms for your soap containers and going back to the small ones so you had individual components. So we've kind of taken this backseat to sustainability. How do we at this stage get back to sustainability so we can maintain it for the long haul?
I can jump in on that one quickly. I would say, yes, whether it's hotel amenities or it's all variety of products that we've now implemented out of necessity, including a lot of ready-to-use product, et cetera. I would agree with the observation that we've perhaps taken a step back, but I'm more of the optimist in this realm, given the innovation portfolio that I see emerging, right? That looks at delivery systems that use concentrates less water, which translates to lower environmental footprint through transportation and storage, et cetera. Localization of supply chain and network. We saw through the pandemic that a variety of constraints arose in terms of availability of materials, which drove localization and redundancy in supply that allows us now to be more thoughtful and to implement programs that aren't so driven by the moment, but the longer term view in terms of sustainability. And so there's a variety of innovation, again, avenues in terms of product delivery, and even reassuring people that washing wares, reusable plates, silverware, glasses, and the like can be done extraordinarily efficiently with a low environmental footprint and confidently to create a ware that can be used hundreds, thousands of times, not single use, and with a good customer experience and safety outcome every time. So there's been a lot of science behind that. It's now about increasing customer awareness and confidence that you don't need a plastic wrap, plastic fork. The QSR industry, et cetera, is built on that. But I don't know that that necessarily has to be our future. And the good news is there's cleaning, sanitizing, disinfection programs in the background that can make that achievable today.
Great.
I think from a corporate standpoint, the economics of plastic are so advantageous to the corporation that it really takes the decision makers within that realm to make a commitment to go against those. So it's tough to speak on the future of that from a sustainability standpoint. I think with the cleaning industry, and I will beat this drum all day, is training, is documentation, and leading to using technology and better utilization of resources. So less waste is, I think, where those paths lead.
Great. Well, we are coming to almost about our end of our time. So this would be a good opportunity for you to pitch your shameless plug, or the one aspect that you're most passionate about that you haven't yet shared. And if someone is looking to reach out to you, how do we go ahead and get in touch with you? We'll get started with you, Steve.
So I've already been shamelessly plugging a little bit during this, but the GBAC Star facility and service provider accreditations are something that we've done over the last year. That was something we were going to do anyway, and the pandemic kind of fast tracked the launch of that. But it's really helping facilities and service providers go through our 20-element program of accreditation. Like I mentioned, we're really focused on continuous improvement. We're really focused on compliance. We're focused on risk assessments and helping the layperson understand what a risk assessment is and how to effectively complete one within a space or within procedures relative to cleaning and disinfecting and infectious disease prevention. And then that verification and validation through audits and inspections. And those are always so daunting. Those are daunting words to hear, but it's about creating a self-audit and a self-sustaining system to where you're not just ready for an outside audit on the day of the audit and then everything goes back to normal. It's really about that self-accountability to make sure that you're at that level all the time, and that's routine. And I don't think that has to be labor intensive to do. It's education, it's training, it's understanding how to do it effectively. So we're not just checklisting ourselves to death, but rather providing value in the time it takes to perform something like that. So I can put my email in the chat to everybody, as well as the website to the GBAC site with our accreditation programs. We've got so many different things in the work. I mentioned our program and technology that we're launching this week. We've got GBAC destinations coming up for launch this month as well, where we've had several cities and municipalities and tourism bureaus be interested in becoming a GBAC Star destination, where they kind of drive the program through their facilities. So they can say, hey, host your event at our convention center, fly into our airport. Here, look at all of these hotels that are committed to these enhanced cleaning procedures for your safety, all of these restaurants to go to, a museum. So a lot of exciting things for us coming out, and I'm excited to hopefully hear from a lot of people throughout this this conference. So thank you.
Great, thank you. And Andy?
Yes, I'd invite you to go look Ecolab Science Certified up, right? Ecolab Science Certified is our program, and it's really dedicated to this create, check, see, and believe clean. And it's not a product positioning or anything of the nature. It's a complete program that really drives customer confidence as they return, to drive foot traffic, awareness, and then engagement in all of those places where people need to see and believe clean in order to continue to stay, rest, sleep, learn, and all the things that we enjoy doing out in the world, right? So Ecolab Science Certified is the program, and it's built with one thing in mind. It's driving better customer outcomes at the lowest total cost for the greatest returns, right? And so that's what our 1,500 scientists do every day, to make sure that the filtering that you would need to do or want to do to make sure you understand what works in the most efficient and effective way is the only thing that you're going to find in that program, and that it comes together in a way that is then easier to implement over time, which drives better outcomes, better business for our customers. That's what we're here to create. So appreciate your time today.
Great, Steve and Andy, thank you very much. For me, you can reach me through Hospitality Leadership Academy. I can certainly assist with those training opportunities to help deliver that customer service experience that you're looking to elevate with your customers, to drive their increased level of confidence for what you're putting into place. I've put into the chat, you can email me at hospitalityleadershipacademy@gmail.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn. We hope that today's session has been informative, have given you a slight little edge on where the future of clean is going, and we look forward to your successful operation and bringing people back in the world of hospitality. Thank you for being with us today.